Hi everyone, I'm Shriya Boppana. I'm a first-year MBA student right here at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. And today I'm joined by Dr. Ronnie Chatterji, who is also a Duke University professor and chief economist at OpenAI. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Chatterji. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is a great idea, and go Duke.
I love it. Go Duke. So if you don't mind, I just want to jump right into the questions, which is, how did you first become interested in AI?
Wow, I think it was when ChatGPT first came out, and I remember walking around an office. At that time, I was working in the federal government, and all of a sudden, like a bunch of the younger folks, and it always starts with the younger folks. This is key, why it's really important to be at a university or a company like OpenAI. A lot of the younger folks in the office were kind of like reciting these really weird poems. Like they had written these things and they were really customized for people. And this is like 2022, okay, circa 2022, 2023. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool poem. Do you come up with that on your own? They're like, no, this thing called ChatGPT wrote it. At that time, and it's like this with so many new technologies, you start to think, oh wow, like that's kind of a cute trick. Like I'm sure that'll go viral and then disappear and we'll never talk about it again. And I didn't yet see, I think, the potential of artificial intelligence, but I saw a really cool app. So I downloaded it, I started to play with it. I used it to write stories for my kids, but I couldn't have really saw the potential then of what we're seeing today with the AI revolution. But it was those early days where I first started to use it. And over time, I've become so passionate about understanding how it's going to impact the economy.
Well, in that case, how do you feel like AI is super different from past technological advancements?
It's a really good question. I think there's a tendency when new stuff comes up, and especially for people who are working in it, to say, this time everything's different.
Right.
And we can't learn anything from history, and we're going to reinvent the rules and all that. And that's exciting. That's why you want to come to a place like Duke and the Fuqua School to do things that never been done before. But it's also important to look at history and say, wow, we've had other fantastic and transformational inventions. If you think about electricity or the steam engine or the integrated circuit, they are fundamental technologies that really change the game for economy, but also society. And AI is like that. So there are precedents. But what's different about AI is a couple of things. One is the adoption rate is incredibly fast. When you see the hundreds of millions of people using ChatGPT and other products, you're seeing the rise of a new category that's moved much faster than anything that came before. I mean, if you look at the number of people who were on Netflix in the first 2 years or who play Fortnite, it's dwarfed by the number of people who are using, for example, ChatGPT. It's happening quicker than it has happened with other technologies. Second thing is the capabilities move so fast. As an economist, I want to study this stuff. I want to put it into a lab and think about how does it affect education? How does it affect banking? How does it affect consulting? But what if what you're studying is changing while you're studying it? And so what I was studying before was like the PC, now I'm looking at an iPhone, and who knows what we'll be looking at in 2 years. And so those two things, the fact that it's been adopted by so many people so quickly, and the capabilities of the technology are evolving before our very eyes, that's what makes it different.
Because it's evolving so fast, I think that there is a portion of the audience that naturally feels concerned about how quickly it's evolving and just the fast-paced inequality and maybe some fear of losing a job here and there. So can we talk about what strategies or policies that you see as most promising to ensure that AI continues to foster this environment of just growth and sustainability?
Yeah, I think it's natural to be skeptical or fearful of new technologies. And it also depends where you sit and your perspective. So as a dad, I think a lot about the implications for my kids and their education. And some of the things about AI are really exciting. I feel like they're going to learn so much more than I did, so much more in an engaging way. But I don't want them to lose the critical thinking skills that I think I developed. Pen and paper, reading things from start to finish, generating those ideas on my own. And now they have an opportunity to have ChatGPT or another technology help them. I worry that they might not learn those skills. And so I'm nervous about that. And I think the way you have to think about this is, how can we design technologies to align with human prosperity and flourishment? So with my kids, I limit how they use ChatGPT. I try to design different exercises for them to use it in a way that I think is productive. And I think when you put humans in the loop, and in this case, parents, dad in the loop, I think it can be better. When it comes to work, it's the same thing. I see so many applications of AI in different parts of the economy, but often what I'm seeing now is that it's not substituting for people. It's actually complementing them and making them work smarter and more productive. And I think what we'll see over time is a lot of jobs are going to change, but people who are doing work now will be freed up to do things in their job that they didn't have enough time to do, or that they enjoy more more than the grunt work that was taken by AI. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to increase productivity and prosperity in that way. There'll be other jobs, though, that are much more vulnerable to AI. And I think we need to proactively identify those. And that's one of my jobs as a chief economist, to think about which sectors are most vulnerable, which jobs are most vulnerable. And it's the job of business and society and the civil sector to figure out together, I should say business, government, and the civil sector, to work together to figure out how do we help folks who are going to be affected by this transition into things that are going to be more satisfying and more productive. And if it comes at us quick, we got to be ready. So the best time to start is actually right now.
And do you think that's more of a US-centric approach? Because you, of course, have absolutely observed how different countries approach AI in general. And I think there are some practices that the US can naturally adopt to be better. But I also want to make sure that we talk about how they remain competitive on this global AI stage. So how can closer collaboration amongst universities and governments and tech firms really help shape this responsible, innovation-friendly policy right here at home?
That's such a great question. I mean, a couple different dimensions. One is just, let's reflect on the global nature of the community we're in here at the Fuqua School of Business. It's not just about how the United States kind of thinks about the rules of the game and the companies that are based here. It's what's going on all around the world. And in the job at OpenAI, I've gone to India and Europe, and soon I'll go to other parts of the world to talk about how the economies in these other parts of the world are going to be affected by AI. And different societies are going to have different expectations from the technology, different rules of the game, and also different use cases that might not appear in all parts of the world. I'll give you an example. When you talked about jobs, I started to think a lot about Japan, where there's a large elderly population, but because of declining fertility rates and also less immigration than we have here in the US, they don't have as many young people to work in some of the jobs that we might have here. So if you think about all the applications to support the elderly in Japan, I think it's one of the reasons that you see a lot more optimism in Japan than you might be seeing in other countries, because they see a need for AI to do some things that aren't being done now. So we have to accommodate these country level differences. When I went to India, I talked to young Indians about AI. Tremendous excitement about this in India, because these students and kids are building on top of APIs like the one provided by OpenAI, and they're creating things they couldn't create before. So they see a tremendous sense of possibility. Different countries, different contexts. When it comes to geopolitics and foreign policy, AI is going to be really important for national security. And so I think what makes it different from a lot of other things you study in business school is there's a strong dimension, not just about which companies are going to win, but which countries are going to be in the lead to shape the future. And as a business person, if you're an MBA student or a policy student, you have to think about the interaction between business and public policy in a whole new way. As someone who worked in the US government for a long time, it's something I thought about every day when I was running the implementation of the CHIPS and Science Act, because from a U.S. national security perspective, making sure these tools are developed here and diffused across our civil and our military is really, really important.
Oh, that's so exciting. So I feel like that naturally creates this sort of almost like a global competition. I don't know if you necessarily agree with that, but I think that it just inevitably raises these questions about sort of accountability, ethics, and let's talk a little bit about what people call responsible AI, which is with this immense power that AI naturally has, it's important to, just in general, wield it responsibly, make sure we're using it in a responsible manner. So how do you personally envision businesses doing that, and sort of academic institutions? How are they playing a role in sort of jointly shaping these practices that we call modern day responsible AI?
I think it's great. I think there's going to be a lot of different opinions about it. How I see responsible AI, though, is you have to conduct the fundamental research to figure out what the impact is. I think a lot of times we are speculating what might happen, what could happen. What I find is if you can actually implement some of these AI projects and measure in a reliable way, in a transparent way, what the impact is on work, on national security, you can make a lot of headway. And I think there's a great role for universities. And Duke is at the lead in this in so many ways. One of the reasons is that we have a really interdisciplinary faculty, and I'm proud to be part of that, where we can look at these problems from a wide variety of perspectives. It's not just the engineering, although it's very important, and the computer science piece, but it's philosophy, it's sociology, it's economics, it's what we do in business schools. And so I think having a well-rounded view is really cool and important to understanding responsible AI. Second, I think that there needs to be sort of a role for government in thinking about how AI diffuses. I don't think from an American competitiveness point of view we want to slow down development of technology. In the end, there's so much possibility here. We have to make sure that we develop this in a way that's aligned with what humans want to do, right? And that's why if humans continue to be in the loop and shaping this, I think it'll be beneficial. I also think as we learn along the way, we have to learn from our mistakes as well as opportunities, right? So if we see things aren't going well, we have to have ways to pivot. And I know a lot of the labs, including OpenAI, are thinking really hard about safety in AI. And there's a huge emphasis around that in the community. So this isn't just people building technology without thinking about the impact. In fact, I think these folks are thinking about the impact quite a bit, as well as people in government and in nonprofits and philanthropy. So I think that team effort will pay off, but there's a lot of uncertainty. And so I feel like I'm trying to participate in a way that I think will be conducive, and I'm sure there'll be lots of other people with different views. And if we can work together on this, that'll be the best thing possible.
I hope you don't mind if I shift to something a little more personal, but of course talking about governments and institutions, but something that I think affects students right here at Duke and Fuqua, and me personally, is sort of like the day-to-day business strategy as someone who's going out into the business world. So bringing it to this actionable level, if you were advising a Fortune 500 CEO today, what would you identify as like the top AI-driven opportunities that they can capitalize on?
Yeah, I think it starts by thinking about AI not just as a tool to increase ROI for one person in the organization. I think a lot of CEOs are thinking about it that way. The hard part of this is to really get the benefits from AI, you need to transform the entire way your organization works. And that's not what people want to hear, right? A lot of people want to plug and play, and they're used to an old model where you put in an enterprise software solution and you can measure some impact in a really tangible way. That's really important. But really, if we're going to have AI first organizations, we're going to change the entire workflow. And that's something that I think the companies that can embrace that the most easily and push towards that are going to be the most successful. I'll give you an example. I think AI can be useful in a lot of different functions in the company, from strategy to finance to the CEO level. But if it's done piecemeal in different parts of the enterprise, it's not going to be as effective, because you'll have one set of the enterprise, the business, let's say a particular function, with one set of rules and a script, and another playing by a totally different set of rules. And that's really not going to optimize the power of AI. I think when you think about intelligence, the best way to think about it is, what if, as a business leader, you could pause your organization, your fast-moving, chaotic organization, pause it, press pause, and take all the intelligence in the world and put it on your most difficult problems. If you could do that, you can transform your business. But it's that type of approach, not just thinking about people typing into a prompt, or typing a prompt into a window and getting a helpful summary. That's like version 1.0. I think we've moved way past that, and enterprises that embrace the true power of intelligence, I think they're going to have a great result.
Well, based off of that, almost, I guess, switching to like an academic perspective, as a professor at Duke, how can AI-driven tools and sort of analytics enhance the way just academic research is conducted across like various different institutions and disciplines?
It's amazing. I mean, I am most excited about the opportunity for AI to transform research. It sounds really wonky, but as an economist, I know that if we can accelerate discovery and commercialization and scaling of products into blockbusters, we're going to grow the economy faster. And it all starts with research, and all starts with the role of great universities like Duke, which has fantastic medical research, scientific research, and of course social science research, and the humanities, which we'll get to in a second too. When it comes to sort of scientific research, there are ways, and we just launched a new initiative between Duke and OpenAI called the Meta Science Initiative, and that's using AI to accelerate discovery, translation, and commercialization. So important. And AI can be useful at all those different parts of the chain. And you already see researchers using it to brainstorm new ideas, to test out different things. Science is like an endless hallway with an infinite number of doors on each side. And so researchers have to go down and open up each door and figure out, okay, what's behind here? Should I go work in this door, or should I go behind the other one? AI can unlock and look behind all those doors for you. And as a researcher, you can go and figure out where the best place to do your work is. That is not just a time saver, it's a boundary spanner and a complete game changer. And so I see scientific research being transformed fundamentally by AI. Social science and humanities also has a huge opportunity here. Think about the qualitative research that I might do for a paper, interviewing CEOs about their attitudes towards innovation. Well, now I can do interviews much more efficiently using AI tools. I can create surveys that are more textured, that have follow-up questions. I can have adaptive questions that depend on the person, how they've answered the question before that, and give them a different kind of question. I can drill down and double click in a way with a standard survey I couldn't do that. If you think about the way I run regressions or the way I build theoretical models in a paper, as economists might do, if you think about AI's ability to help you do those things, all of a sudden you can be much more productive in your social science research. And lastly, in the humanities, I think about the efforts at Duke and other places to digitize large bodies of text, so to make it easier for historians and philosophers to study those. AI can be a great assist on that too, in terms of finding in very highly structured data, right, where are the new research areas? Where can we make a contribution? And so it's so funny to think about it, but with all the practical impacts of AI, for me, the most important seismic shift from AI will be its ability to transform all kinds of research, which makes us smarter and also is going to make us more productive.
Well, speaking of smarter, I think maybe the students watching would probably like to know a little bit about how AI can affect their student experience.
Sure.
So let's talk more about, imagine you're this incoming student, you're coming into this university for the very first time. How are you exploring these AI ideas, specifically almost at Fuqua, and which opportunities do you think would actually be the most impactful to their journey?
I mean, first, take advantage of the cohort. Like, what's so great about being in a place like Fuqua, which has this team atmosphere, people, you know this from your first year, people help each other. Like, when I came to Fuqua, like 17, 18 years ago, people told me about Team Fuqua, and I was like, oh, that sounds like a great tagline. But I actually have lived it and seen it through successive groups of students, staff, and faculty. It's real. And so you have this team that's willing to help you. And the great thing about tools like ChatGPT and other generative AI tools is that sometimes you need a little help of like, oh, how do you use it? I'll tell you what I did today. I took a picture of my lunch and I asked ChatGPT, hey, like, is there a way I can make this a little bit healthier? Because like, you know, summer's coming up, I gotta do my thing. And like, I wouldn't have known to do that, except I was watching an influencer on social media who said that's how he uses it. So if you have people around you, right, who are using it for all these cool use cases, you can ask them, talk to them, they can show you how to do it, what the right prompts are. Take advantage of that. And it's the best time to learn. So that's number one, baseline knowledge, fool around with the technology. Second thing is, think about how it's gonna balance with what you wanna learn at Fuqua. To me, what I ask my students to do is when I give them an assignment that involves thinking, I ask them to do that thinking themselves first. And then I ask them to tell me, hey, if you're gonna use generative AI on an assignment, tell me how you used it. Tell me the prompts. Mm-hmm. And usually when I review an exam, if it's a narrative kind of exam, an essay or something like that, I will then show them the prompts I use and how I generated these things and kind of where the tools maybe would have fallen short or whether they were better or whether they gave me a new idea. I think deciding for yourselves, right, especially as a mature MBA student, how you think it's going to be important to your goals is really important. I think for me, if I was approaching as a student, like some of the things I want to learn about business school are the human connections between folks and the critical thinking and analysis skills I'm going to have to do, not just on paper, not just at my computer screen, but in front of my boss one day, live. Mm-hmm. And if I outsource that to a generative AI tool or any other software package, I'm not going to be good on the spot. I'm not going to be able to do those calculations in front of people. I'm not going to be able to explain how I came up with it. So it's up to you at the end of the day. For undergrads and more junior students, I think there's a different case study to think about or a different context. But for MBA students, it's really going to be up to you to figure out how you want to think about this and listen to your professors, of course. I can't get away with not saying that. But in the end, you're going to do what's best for you and your career journey. And I really would encourage you to think carefully about where you're going to go, what skills you're going to need. And that will probably dictate how you're going to best use these tools.
Well, so what I'm picking up from this is one, everybody please take Professor Chatterji's class.
Yes.
But two, now that we're also discussing just the student experience, I think a lot of the reason why students are even here is because they're looking for their next career opportunity. So maybe that includes something like the job market, maybe it doesn't. But if we could talk about just those entering the job market for a second in this day and age, you know, definitely like myself.
Yeah.
Do you think that there are just jobs that AI will create that will require higher education, or could they also like just accommodate this spectrum of special skills for different types of people?
I think what's so interesting is like if you look at the job descriptions we had, you know, decades ago, there's so many jobs today that weren't even invented or we didn't have words for back then. And I think when people ask me this about their own careers, even my kids who are younger, I say they're probably going to be doing things I can't even describe now. There's all this new work that gets created by new technologies. And I think it's really important to develop sort of neuroplasticity, being able to be flexible across different things, and being able to be tactical when you need to execute on particular ideas. There's going to be trends that are going to start while you're at business school that you're going to learn about from your colleagues here that you're going to need to jump on. And that could be your next career move. And so I think developing that flexibility and resilience as a base level is really important. No generative AI tool is going to teach you that. You got to learn it yourself. I think at the end of the day, where your career goes in the job descriptions, it's really hard to predict. But if you have that mentality, I think you can be really successful. The thing I'll say is AI is going to transform some sectors much more quickly than others. Think about sectors that are really highly regulated, or in other countries, there might be a lot of tacit knowledge involved in doing the job. I think about a lawyer in an emerging market versus in the US, where everything's written down and there's sort of a code. It's different in other places. So by profession, by geography, by firm, right? By regulatory environment, all those things will shape AI. So if you want to go to an industry that's going to be changed a lot, you might choose a certain kind of career. But if you want something more stable that's going to change slower, you can be strategic in how you pick it. And I think you're going to see those patterns in AI. And the people who manage their careers most successfully are going to be the people who are thinking about how AI is going to help them do their job better.
Well, I guess in the spirit of moving forward, before we close this incredible interview, I just want to give you space to maybe cover something that I haven't touched on, maybe a topic I haven't asked about, anything new and upcoming that you want to introduce to our audience today.
I think one, first, just thanks to Duke and Fuqua and the community. It's really important. This has been home for me forever, and the reason that I'm become so passionate about this is because things I learned here from faculty members who mentored me and trained me through the years, students who have been teaching here for a long time. I learned a lot from their experiences and their career journeys, and Duke all the way up to the president of Duke to students here now have really supported me in this step. So I really owe a lot to it, and I think what I feel is like a responsibility to try to do my job the best I can. It's not an easy job. There's a lot of uncertainty about where the economy is going and how AI is going to affect it, and people are nervous and excited about all the opportunities. And I just think my job is to try to make that conversation a little better and a little smarter by the work I'm doing. And if I can do that, I think I'll do right by me and my reputation, but more importantly, I guess also right by Duke.
Oh, well, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Chatterji. Honestly, I think that the entirety of Duke University is behind me when I say we're so thankful for you for being on the cutting edge of such world and life-changing technologies. But that concludes our presentation and our interview for today. Thank you so much again to Professor Chatterji for joining us. For all incoming students, he will be hopefully teaching more classes, so we hope you do decide to join him in all his capacities, any way in which you can at Duke University. And thank you so much for tuning in today. Again, I'm Shriya Boppana, and this is Professor Aaron Chatterji.